Is something wrong?
Yeah, something's wrong.
Come in.
And I was pulling my boat back in. I was tying it up, and the guy next to me was tying his boat up. And we were just talking, and the guy said, "Hey, look at the flare." And I turned around, looked at the flare.
We now join our regularly scheduled program, already in progress.
As soon as I said that, the thing just like exploded, and it looked like a Christmas tree of fire going down to the water.
The information is very sketchy. Apparently the plane was seen to explode and fall into the sea almost immediately. And there was an alert put out at that point, and units began to respond.
We have helicopters flying over the house. Before we left the beach to find out exactly what happened, you could see all of the boats and all of the helicopters out in the water circling.
10:40 p.m., the first live aerial pictures of the crash scene came through, but news helicopters were kept far from the scene.
And what you see out there in the distance are, and we're going to get a little bit closer right now, are some of the lights of the boats in the water that are involved in the rescue effort. There are scores of them out there right now. It is an enormous rescue effort between the National Guard and the Coast Guard. They are searching an enormous area.
Ted, Mike Kelly of TWA Operations gave a briefing just a few minutes ago at JFK Airport, and he said that TWA security has been at one of the highest possible levels during recent months because of the upcoming Olympics. Ted?
All right, Bill Blakemore, thanks very much. I noticed that there was a discrepancy between the numbers you gave and the numbers I had. We'll try and get that nailed down so that we can tell people for sure. We're going to keep going now with yet another eyewitness to the event this evening. Joining us from Mauritius Bay, Annunziata Sahid, who also witnessed tonight's tragedy. Ms. Sahid, why don't you tell us what you saw?
Well, I live in Quogue on the ocean. I was looking out over the water, and I heard a loud explosion, a noise first, and then a fireball appeared in the sky about 7,000 feet up, bright orange and red flame, and then it just dropped out of the sky. A huge fireball hit the surface of the water, and there were approximately 5 more explosions, and then very little flame, and then black smoke that just followed the trail of the fireball from the sky.
When you say about 5 more explosions, are you talking about whatever it was that hit the water, or are you talking about 5 more explosions in the sky?
No, no, no. When it hit the water, there were 5 more explosions. But let me tell you, Ted, first there was the noise of an explosion. Then the fireball appeared in the sky. Then after that, it dropped out of the sky like a huge beam of fire with pieces falling off the beam, hit the surface of the ocean, and then 5 more explosions. I then called the police. They were on my deck within minutes. And actually, they radioed for the Coast Guard from my deck, and there was a Coast Guard boat that arrived in front of my home within 5 minutes. There was also another plane or helicopter in the sky at the time that seemed to be coming from the town of Riverhead, which isn't that far, that flew over the black smoke within minutes. I'm approximately 10 miles southeast of Center Mauritius, and we've had the fire department and police department with floodlights going up and down facing the ocean, I guess looking for survivors. And the sky is literally lit up with helicopters and rescue personnel.
Ms. Sahid, let me ask you the obvious question, and I must say it sounds from your description as though it would be impossible, but can you imagine anybody surviving the scene that you described?
I would say it's almost impossible. I'm not a pilot, but I will tell you that fire explosion, the initial fire that appeared, was so huge, and that the flame that fell out of the sky was just enormous, and there was really no black smoke for a while until this huge flame hit the surface of the ocean.
Ms. Sahid, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. We have a number of both aviation and security specialists standing by, and we'll be turning to them in just a moment.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by the men and women of General Motors.
The car that took you to practice. The truck that took you to the trials. The car that took you to the airport. The van that took you to the games. None of them can take you this last part of the trip.
Sprint has a great offer for your small business. A year of long distance on Fridays free.
I'll call you next Friday.
Call now 1-800-598-5000 and don't miss another free Friday at work, only from Sprint Business.
Heard what's playing at Sears? The 72-hour sale. Your ticket to summer savings. Like 0% finance charge till January 97 on appliances, camcorders, computers, and TVs. But hurry, because after Saturday, this act goes totally unplugged.
ABC Thursday. Come face to face with courage.
Don't just let me die in here!
Hate.
You're dead!
Hope.
It's gonna be all right.
Behind every badge lives a hero. High Incident. ABC Thursday.
When compared to European luxury cars in its class, the Lexus LS400 enjoys the highest customer loyalty. It offers the best retained value. It costs thousands less than its competition. In fact, the LS400 is so superior, it turns European luxury cars into sitting ducks. Test drive the LS400 at Lexus of Nashville. And be careful, it's loaded.
The same old politics. Dole attacks Clinton. Hold it. President Clinton cuts taxes for millions of working families, proposes tax credits for college. But Dole Gingrich tried to raise taxes on 8 million. Dole voted to raise payroll taxes, Social Security taxes, the 90 income tax increase, $900 billion in higher taxes. Republicans called him tax collector for the welfare state.
You're going to see the real Bob Dole out there from now on.
The real Bob Dole. 35 years of higher taxes.
We've got Jim Hall, the chairman of the National Transportation and Safety Board, standing by. But before I turn to him, I just want to bring you up to speed again on the information. We do have some late information from a Mike Kelly, who I gather is the head of operations at John F. Kennedy Airport. The plane that exploded in the sky at about 8:40 this evening was TWA Flight 800 that was bound from JFK to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. And the numbers that Mr. Kelly gives us now is a total of 229 people on board. There were 212 passengers and then a total of 17 crew members, total of 229. And that was a Mike Kelly of TWA who gave us that information. Jim Hall, the chairman of the NTSB, is standing by. Mr. Hall, I realize under circumstances like this, there isn't often much that you can say, but tell us what you can.
Well, Mr. Koppel, what I can tell you is that we have launched our GO team under the direction of our Vice Chairman, Bob Francis, and our investigator in charge, Al Dickinson, to New York. There'll be about 20 individuals from the National Transportation Safety Board that will be traveling up there this evening. We will have among that group specialists in aircraft structures, systems, operations, power plants, so that we can look at all of the aspects of Flight 800 and try to determine exactly what the facts are that brought about this accident this evening.
I don't know if you heard me say it earlier, Mr. Hall, but I quoted a source from the FAA saying that if there is reason to believe that this was the result of some terrorist act, if it was a bomb that exploded the plane, that the investigation would then come under the direction of the FBI. Is that correct?
That's correct. What we will do is, and we have coordinated in numerous instances in the past with the FBI, we did so on the recent ValueJet crash until we ascertained exactly what happened. If that is a fact, then we would turn the investigation over to the FBI.
Until you know, and obviously, especially when all the debris is going to be in the water, as will be the case here, it may be a long time before you know for sure what happened.
Well,
for the time being, who runs the operation and how is it run?
Well, we would run it in close coordination with the FBI. We would be the government agency in charge of the investigation, and at such point we determined that there was criminal activity involved, then the investigation would be turned over to the FBI.
Is there anything you can tell us about this particular crash? Anything you know at this point that you can add?
Mr. Koppel, most of the information I know is what you know and what has been already reported on television. I think the focus at this point obviously needs to be on on whatever hope there might still be that there are some survivors, and I'm sure that the individuals who are responsible for search and rescue with the United States Coast Guard and with the state of New York are doing everything they can as we speak to search and see if there's any hope that someone survived this unfortunate crash. That needs to be our focus this evening. In the morning, with daylight, we will obviously be trying to recover as quickly as possible as much of the structure as we can, find out from the air traffic control tapes and what other information we have available to start piecing together as quickly as possible what happened, so we can promptly report to the American people what we know about this accident.
Mr. Hall, you're good to give us of your time. Thanks very much. Jim Hall, the chairman of the National Transportation and Safety Board. My colleague Chris Bury is standing by with a piece of late information. Go ahead, Chris.
Ted, a couple of things, and again, this is all very preliminary and sketchy, but the U.S. Coast Guard tells Nightline that about 8:30 tonight, a New York State Air National Guard C-130 was performing some kind of pyrotechnic exercise, perhaps setting off flares off the southern shore of Long Island, and this C-130 is involved in training for shuttle recovery. And about 8:30 tonight, they got numerous calls, both from boaters and from people on Long Island, of perhaps flares going off from this C-130. And the second thing is, about 40 minutes later, a Suffolk County police helicopter patrolling off Long Island noticed some flames in the water, and their first reading was that perhaps a barge was on fire or perhaps a boat was on fire, and that they had not got any kind of official notification from the FAA tower at JFK Airport that in fact a plane had gone down. So this is preliminary information, but it raises two questions. One, did the C-130 have anything to do with tonight's crash? And two, why did the FAA not inform local authorities for over a period of at least 40 minutes?
Chris, let me just point out that the video we were looking at there a moment ago was videotape of the crash site, and all those little lights, obviously, that you could see around the flames in the center were a search and rescue craft. We're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back in a moment.
Oh boy, looks like Sarah caught that bug that's going around. This is when you really want your mom. Unfortunately, Mom's not in her office. Now what?
Audiences and critics everywhere have witnessed the phenomenon. It's one of the most moving and magical films in years.
You do that one more time.
Gene Shalit calls it romantic and absorbing. Joel Siegel raves Phenomenon is the great date movie of the summer.
What's she got anyway?
My heart. And Siskel and Ebert give Phenomenon 2 thumbs up.
Name as many mammals as you can in 60 seconds.
John Travolta.
How about alphabetical?
Phenomenon. Rated PG. Now playing.
I think Sarah here has a fairy godmother. The nurse dialed one number, and like magic, the call went to her mom's office, her cellular phone, her pager. Does this happen in real life?
Friday, whatever happened to good nutrition for kids? It's not in some meals made just for them. Look closely at what you're really feeding them. 2020, Friday on ABC.
Your car's finish has lots of enemies. Pretty soon, you need the better get Mako guys.
Get our great-looking Mako Ambassador finish for one low price, only $189. Call Mako today.
Mako, America's smart choice.
This week at Just for Feet, a jam-up sale on Reebok basketball shoes. The Reebok Swingman Low that was $64.95, now $39.99. The Swingman Mid was $74.95, now just $39.99. And Swingman High was $79.95, only $39.99. Or get the Sean Kemp Kamikaze 2 in an electrifying selection of colors that was $84.95, now only $39.99. This week at Just for Feet, where your 13th pair is free.
Hey, Joyce, let's go to lunch. Good idea.
At Donaldson Air Conditioning, we're on call 24 hours a day, every day. We'll give you free expert advice on the phone and get there fast when you need us. And Donaldson insists on top-quality equipment like Train, famous for reliability. All this gives us a reputation for keeping our customers happy, and it keeps us hopping. But please understand, every now and then, we have to eat.
Well, that was nice. Most relaxing lunch we've had for a while.
Call now for a special $59.50 preseason tune-up and watch us earn our reputation.
Click it.
Cricket.
Safer. Click it.
Cricket.
Safer. Click it.
Cricket.
Safer. The safer lighter.
Cricket.
Just to summarize again, there has been a mid-air explosion off the coast of Long Island. A TWA jumbo jet, a 747 that was bound for Paris, out of New York, exploded in midair for reasons that are still not clear. There were 229 people aboard. As yet, the Coast Guard and Navy, engaged in a massive search and rescue operation, has found a number of bodies. They are not saying yet how many, and no survivors. We do have a telephone number that you can call if you would like to check if someone that you know or a loved one may have been aboard that plane. I assume that they have a passenger list available. You see the number on your screen in front of you right now. It is 1-800-438-9892. Again, that's a number if you're looking for information about who may have been aboard. Flight 800. I wouldn't call asking who was aboard, but if you know someone who may have been aboard and want information, that's the number to call. Joining us now in our Washington Bureau, Mary Schiavo is the former Inspector General of the National Transportation and Safety Board, of the FAA, I'm sorry. Also joining us here in Washington, Larry Johnson, former Deputy Director for Transportation Security at the State Department's Office of Counterterrorism. Mary Schiavo, forgive me, I got that wrong, but what do you make of what you're hearing so far?
Well, three things came immediately to mind, and unfortunately they were three other crashes. One was, of course, Pan Am 103, another was KAL, and the other was Sioux City, and they each present different scenarios. Pan Am, of course, would, if it was a similar situation, would represent a significant failure in security. Curiously, the last report I signed out as Inspector General on July 3rd, delivering July 5th, was another report on the security situation of our airports in this country. A KAL-type situation, I mean, another instance where a plane was brought down was by some external force, such as a surface-to-air, a bomb, some kind of incendiary device that was fired upon the plane, which is rare, but I guess it could happen. And third was a situation like Sioux City, where you have an uncontained engine failure, which exploded and then sent shrapnel. It would be, I would imagine, difficult for a situation like that to bring down a plane in this manner, but then you don't know the circumstances of events. So those were the three things that immediately came to my mind.
Well, two things that I want to ask you then. First of all, the safety record of the 747 in particular has been extraordinarily good, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
How likely is it that an explosion generated by an engine or something that was not placed on board the plane for the express purpose of blowing it up, that something like that could cause the plane to in effect shatter in midair?
I say it would be very unusual given the circumstances of events, but we don't know. I mean, it also comes to mind instances like the Value Jet fire, where you did have a catastrophic burning of the plane, but it wasn't quite as quick as has been reported by eyewitnesses here. And the reason that came to mind is my former office had obtained convictions of some suppliers of jet engine parts to TWA for bogus parts, and they obtained that conviction earlier this year. And it's obviously impossible to know if there was any connection, and you would assume if they were convicted that it was cleaned up. But that's why I thought of ValueJet in Sioux City and a Delta situation.
Before I turn to Larry Johnson, let me just take you back to your point number one. You said sort of in passing that the last report that you issued before you retired raised certain questions. I'm not using your language precisely, but raised certain questions about security precautions at airports. Be a little more explicit, would you?
Well, that was a follow-up report. We had previously issued a report on security a couple of years ago, and the department had, at least not to my knowledge, I don't know if they've decided to what to do with that report, but we'd followed up on it. I'll discuss the previous report because that was released. And in that report, my former employees were able to breach security at U.S. airports 40% of the time, including getting all the way into cargo holds and into the plane, into the passenger section. They literally could travel at will throughout the major airports of the U.S. and breaching security. And obviously that was a great concern to us, as was the inability to sense explosive devices. Foreign airports, some foreign countries are putting in those devices. We are not, for various reasons. The FAA has said that the devices aren't foolproof yet, and they don't want to have the expenditures for that yet. I think if the situation turns out to be something like that, we certainly should reconsider that decision.
I know you don't want to go into the second report because it hasn't been released yet, but can you at least indicate whether that report suggested that there has been improvement or a failure to improve?
Well, as I say, the decision has not been made to release it. I did sign it out, and it was delivered to the Secretary, discussed with the head of the FAA before I left, so I better leave it at that. But the previous report was, of course, critical.
Larry Johnson, from what you have heard, and again, I'd like you to rip apart anything you've heard me say or anyone else for that matter on this program. We don't want to jump to the conclusion that this was necessarily a bomb. But how likely does it seem to you from what you've heard?
I think there's probably a 90% chance. Again, you can't rule out the possibility of mechanical failure or some freak accident. But when you go back and look at the history of planes that have been brought down catastrophically like this, and then you see the fires on the ground, it does call to mind Pan Am 103. It's just an unfortunate track record when you go back and look at the evidence.
Let me interrupt you just for one moment to warn our affiliates that because of the extraordinary nature of tonight's story and the fact that news is still developing even as we are on the air and will probably continue to develop through the night and into tomorrow, we're going to go beyond our normally allotted time. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
This kind of explosion, I mean, it's natural for people not to want to jump to conclusions, not to want to start pointing a finger of blame at particular groups or individuals. But I think what we're going to find out over the next 48 to 72 hours as the forensic work gets underway on the ground, or in this case in the water, they're going to be able to recover pieces of wreckage. And I'm fairly confident what they're going to find is it will point to an explosive device, and it'll probably be a fairly large one.
We're talking now about an investigation and a recovery effort that's going to have to take place roughly 10 miles out to sea. I don't know what the depth of the waters out there are, but they're probably quite significant.
Right. No, listen, it's a difficult problem. It would, on these kinds of terrible things, it'd be better if the plane fell on the ground. But fortunately, it's close enough to the shore that it's a manageable task. It's not an impossible task. It's something that's within the capability of the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, as we saw with the recovery of the Challenger back in, I guess that was 1986.
Mary Schiavo, let me just ask you one more question before we take another break. And again, we don't know this to be the case, but a source of ours at the FAA says there was apparently no voice contact from the plane before the incident happened. That does suggest that something happened instantaneously, even aboard the ValueJet plane. There were some communications back and forth before the smoke overwhelmed the crew.
That's right. That's right, and which does suggest some kind of a catastrophic event like a bomb, and which, of course, would lead to the ultimate conclusion that we've had a breach in security.
All right, we're going to take another break. We'll be back in a moment.
Heard what's playing at Sears? The 72-hour sale. White hot savings on all you need for summer. Save an extra 40% on clearance apparel for you, your guy, even your kids. Through Saturday only at Sears. Hey, it sounds like something everybody can get into.
I'm not sure if Sarah has a fairy godmother, but Mom has MCI1. See, no matter where she is, MCI1 gets the call through. Mom to the rescue.
Is your hip okay? How's the pain?
I feel great. I took some Tylenol. Extra strength.
Oh, I'm still surprised the doctor gave you Tylenol after your hip surgery.
Hey, I wouldn't let you down on our anniversary.
Oh.
Morning, guys. Just when you think your diarrhea medicine is working, it can let you down. But you can count on Imodium AD to stop diarrhea, often in just one dose.
We should have stopped for Imodium AD.
One dose relief you can count on.
Sears is filled to capacity with tires for whatever you drive. And right now, all Goodyear tires are on sale at the lowest prices of the season. Only at our garage, the Sears Auto Center.
So Mom not only got the message with MCI1, she got a cellular phone, pager, email, and internet. As for Sarah, well, she got Mom. MCI1, life just got simpler.
From the master of suspense comes the movie event of July.
There's something miraculous about it.
One of Stephen King's biggest miniseries is on ABC.
Something is happening to this town, and I'm telling you, it has something to do with that thing in the woods in there.
Just when you thought the summer invasion was over.
Tommy knockers, Tommy knockers, knocking at the door.
Jimmy Snitz, Marg Helgenberger, Joanna Cassidy, and Tracy Lords in Stephen King's electrifying thriller, The Tommyknockers, ABC Sunday.
When it's a story that's just breaking.
SWAT members still coming in. We've got negotiators.
See it first on News 2.
If it's a story that impacts you.
Or if it's a story that affects your family. See it first on News 2.
If it's a problem that needs to be solved.
When it's details that you need.
See it first on News 2.
News 2, where coverage comes first.
Just a quick recap now. TWA's Flight 800 had originated in Los Angeles this morning. Then there was an equipment change, which means that the passengers from Los Angeles got off the plane that brought them from LA to New York. There was an equipment change at JFK Airport. And the 747 took off from JFK with 229 people aboard, bound for Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. At 8:40, the plane exploded in midair. It is still unclear what caused the explosion. As of now, there are no survivors. There have been no reports of any survivors, but the Navy and the Coast Guard are on the scene, as is an entire flotilla of search and rescue craft looking for survivors. But as of this hour, there are none. We have one new detail. According to TWA, the plane, that is the aircraft, had flown into JFK from Athens, Greece, 3 hours before it departed. So the passengers originated in Los Angeles. The plane which took them out of JFK originated in Athens. I want to just show you a little piece of videotape here now. What you're looking at is the Air National Guard in West Hampton, Long Island. It is being prepared now as a morgue for the bodies of those who have been recovered by the Coast Guard. That's a piece of video that just came in a moment ago. Joining us now from Seattle is ABC News aviation consultant John Nance.
Good evening, Ted.
John, I know that you have both been participating with Peter Jennings earlier this evening and have had a chance to sort of mull over what little information is available right now. Can you imagine anything other than either a mid-air collision or an explosion caused by some kind of an explosive device aboard that plane?
Well, I think we've pretty well outlined it to those possibilities, Ted. If you don't have a midair and you don't have an explosion, by the way, an explosion could come from an advertent or inadvertent source. It could be something that was placed on the bird for that particular purpose, or it could be something like Value Jet, which was an accident, which is a little harder to conceive of. There is also, we have to admit, the possibility of structural failure, but it is so remote, it is totally unprecedented, and it's almost to the point of being at far fringes of possibility. The thing that you're looking at here, absolutely, the safety board will be an explosion possibly caused by some incendiary device placed on the airplane advertently or inadvertently.
Well, I want you to go over something that I heard you discussing with Peter earlier this evening, and that is the safety record of the 747. You were making the point that it is normally such an incredibly safe aircraft.
I just climbed off of one about an hour ago coming into Seattle, and I'm always comfortable on them because this airplane is really the queen of the sky. She's been flying for nearly 30 years. Every minute of every day there are 747s in the air all over the world. This airplane's record is absolutely superlative in all models, and this was an earlier model airplane. So there is absolutely nothing to look at immediately and say, well, this is a propensity, or there is a worrisome thought that there might be a propensity for this airplane to come apart in the air. It doesn't happen that way. There have been engine problems with an El Al 747 that was a freighter. That just isn't indicated in this type of result. When those engines came off in Amsterdam, everybody will remember a couple of years ago, the plane was still flyable up to a point. Here, it obviously came apart in midair, and you were right to point out that the fact that we did not have any transmissions apparently from the crew indicates that this was a catastrophic occurrence.
I don't know how long you've been able to hear the program, but you may have heard Mary Schiavo indicate before that the FAA's initial investigation, and she would not say it, but I get the impression that the latest investigation has suggested that there are security problems at a number of U.S. airports. Are you knowledgeable about that?
Well, to a certain extent, yes, but I don't really consider myself an expert in that area. But I will tell you this, and one thing we've got to keep in mind. 2 points, really. Number one is the fact that commercial aviation, by its inherent nature of being available to all of us, regardless of what security measures we put in, is to a certain extent going to be vulnerable. Even though security has been beefed up quite a bit, Kennedy certainly it's been beefed up, there is still a certain level of vulnerability. Again, we don't know that this is what happened today. And secondly, there are groups out there, as we well know in this world, who if they're determined to do something, it's going to be almost impossible to stop them in the final analysis. Now, and again, I caution, as you have, Ted, and as all of us have, that it is far too early to be saying, well, it was an explosion from a bomb or anything else, but that, after all, is going to be the area the NTSB is going to be looking at most carefully at the very first.
John Nance, thanks very much. Larry Johnson, it does sound as though we are moving into what was your area. You were in counterterrorism at the State Department. Just give us your thoughts before we wrap it up for this evening, and then we'll turn to Mary Schiavo for a final word.
Well, number one, we do have there are reports of groups that have made threats to attack U.S. aviation. Right now in New York City, Ramzi Youssef is on trial for planning several attacks against U.S. airliners more than a year ago. The followers of Sheikh Abdul Rahman have threatened retaliation because of his trial and conviction. And there's a Hamas leader, Marzouk, that's under possible deportation to Israel. Hamas has threatened to attack the United States. Now, I'm not saying those groups have done this. That still has to be verified. But the fact is there are threats out there.
No, and I'm glad you said that, and let me underscore it and just remind our viewers that we were all very much in a hurry after the explosion in Oklahoma City. We started pointing in those directions, and it's a terribly unfair thing, particularly to Arab Americans, that we do that before we know any facts. About the only thing to which the evidence does seem to be pointing right now is a very strong suggestion that there was an explosion aboard that plane, and that may have been caused by terrorists, but we haven't a clue at this point. I mean, literally not a clue.
Ted, it's possible that it could turn out that this may have been some individual who, for whatever reason, wanted to commit suicide. I mean, it could go from that extreme to terrorism, and I don't think we should jump to the conclusion that it's terrorism. We have to consider it as a likely possibility, or at least a reasonable possibility.
Mary Schiavo, wrap things up for us this evening, would you?
Well, I am particularly troubled by the indices, and particularly troubled since the last report that I did as Inspector General was on security and a warning about security. And if that turns out to be the case, then we have to go back and rethink everything from Pan Am 103 on and ask ourselves, and particularly ask the FAA, if they've really done what they can do. Now, there are many other scenarios, and I've mentioned a few other crashes that seem similar, but it looks like some kind of an incendiary device, and I think that the stakes have been greatly heightened, probably because of the Olympics and other things, but I don't think we've done all we should and can do.
You were talking to me earlier on about some kind of a device that can detect explosives, I assume, in luggage or wherever else inside the cargo holds of the plane. We don't have it. We don't use it. Why?
There is such a device that has been developed, and other countries are installing such a device. It's a bomb sniffing device of what it is. It's like a bomb dog, except it's a device. It can sniff explosives on people and luggage, you name it. The reasons we don't have it, the FAA has said it's too expensive and that the technology isn't fail-safe. If this is another situation like Pan Am, I don't think those answers and those excuses are good enough.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. I must tell you that we just got word from our source at the FAA urging us to stay away from the notion of a mid-air collision, that there is absolutely no indication that there was another aircraft there at the time, which of course leads even more directly then to the inference that apparently there was some kind of an explosion aboard the aircraft. We do want to show you one more time before we close for tonight the number at TWA. If you believe that someone you know or a member of your family was aboard that flight, this is the number to call for TWA Flight 800. If you can't read it on the screen, it is 1-800-438-9892. 438-9892. We hope you'll stay with ABC News throughout the night and, of course, tomorrow on Good Morning America for the latest on the crash of TWA Flight 800. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
ABC Thursday. There's an arsonist destroying the city, and this man must clear his family's name.
My father's guilty. It's open and shut.
Get the bomb squad there right away.
Now he must expose the guilty to free the innocent. A 2-hour movie, The Commish Redemption. ABC Thursday.
An innocent child assaulted. An outraged father driven to revenge.
Do you think he was crazy when he did it?
A case that will inflame a town and change 3 lives forever.
I quit now and all this for nothing. No.
Sandra Bullock, Samuel L. Jackson, Matthew McConaughey, Kevin Spacey.
You think they deserve to die?
Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell.
A Time to Kill. Rated R. Starts Wednesday, July 24th at a theater near you.
Liquidation sale. State Fairgrounds. Color TVs and VCRs $99. Camcorders $2.99. IBM computers $3.99. Pentiums $9.99. Nike, Reebok, Fila, Adidas. More shoes $19. Tires $13. Seiko and Citizen watches $49. Hoover vacuums $29. Levi jeans $10. Gold jewelry $10 a gram. Sega and Super Nintendo movies.